Well, good afternoon. If everyone would take their seat, we will kick off the NASDA Winter Policy Conference. Hopefully you've been able to grab a cup of coffee, a little dessert. Hopefully you had lunch. We had enough out there. It was good too. Hey, our thanks to the Renaissance for the wonderful lunch today and the breakfast this morning. I think we owe them a big round of applause. So I know we've had a chance, because we've had a few meetings already this morning. We've said welcome. There's been great conversation, good meetings, great dialogue, but I haven't had a chance to formally actually welcome you to the Winter Policy Conference, so this is my opportunity. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to really look at and celebrate our theme, Uniting All for Agriculture. And if anybody was out in the Commons area, you would notice that we have some block letters and I think it's pound all for ag. Hashtag. Oh, no one says pound anymore. Hashtag. Sorry. I better get with it. Uniting all for ag. Yes. Well, I got to also say that your participation, your involvement really makes this premier event a great thing. It's because of that it gives us the opportunity as states, as members, to network. It also gives us an opportunity to exchange ideas, a lot of great conversation and dialogue, and also taking action at times, which we've done on a few occasions, a few things. There'll be more as we go on, as we continue with our work as a group. We'll have good committee meetings this afternoon, but it's also an opportunity to really connect with our federal partners. And when you really think about how broad we are as an organization, it's amazing the connections we have. And in fact, tomorrow, I hope everybody can be there, but the Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Sonny Perdue, will be hosting us tomorrow afternoon at USDA. So I look forward to that, and I encourage everyone to attend if they can. Also, I think it's a wonderful opportunity to glean useful information that we can take back to our states and continue to develop those relationships with our federal partners. Yesterday, the Board of Directors had a call to action for 2024, and this is in our discussion about resilience for rural America. A couple things that we touched on and emphasized was cooperative federalism, with that strong state and federal partnership, but it's also rural communities must come first. And I think that both camps have clearly understood that our rural communities can no longer be ignored. But as we execute our advocacy on 2020 policy priorities, this will help us focus in and close in on our rural opportunity gap. You'll also hear more on this during our regional meetings and as we head into Medora in August this fall, which I hope everyone can make it. I think we're going to have a wonderful time. But with that, we'll talk about that more at our regional meetings. And I think this would be a wonderful time to now invite up the CEO of NASDA, Dr. Barb Glenn. Please help me welcome her.
Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone, to the 2020 NASDA Winter Policy Conference. I'm honored and humbled to kick this conference off with you today. I want to send out a special welcome to our members of NASDA, the commissioners, secretaries, and directors of the State Departments of Ag, but also to our partners. And the partners at this meeting, they're wearing also a white lanyard, but they've got red writing on there. So thank our partners. Thank you, NASDA partners, very much. It's a first, this conference. We are live streaming today. So hello out there, live stream Facebook and Twitter. We hope you're out there, and we're looking forward to it. At NASDA, we are always leaning forward into this opportunity to focus on NASDA's growing influence and impact on comprehensive policy solutions. And often, of course, as Doug said, those things are implemented by that strong state and federal partnership. We're united around our 2020 policy priorities. The board actually approved those in December of 2019. So we're on our way for this year. Today, we're really excited to celebrate this theme, Uniting All for Agriculture. That indeed is what you do every day. NASDA's Winter Policy Conference isn't just a slogan, it's not just a tagline, it's in our core, and that's important because State Departments of Ag, I believe, are essential leaders to the future of modern agriculture, modern food, modern natural resources. So we have a lot to do. And we'll do that under our new call to action, Resilience for Rural America. So with a big R, we're carrying that banner. Today, we're also united with the NASDA Foundation, who are hosting for the first time the NASDA Foundation Manners Ag Policy Summit. It's my pleasure to inform you of this if you haven't picked up on this already, but we have with us 11 collegiate students, some are undergrads, some are graduate students, from all over the United States. So I'd like to invite the Manners students who were competitively selected to stand up, please. Let's give them a hand. Where are you guys? Yeah. Thank you so much, and congratulations to all of you. If you want to know what manners means, that's a good conversation starter. I want you to hone in on these young people. Please do. The other thing we're doing about Uniting All for Ag is we're amplifying our voice during the conference. We're going to have some fun. The attendee who makes the most Twitter posts using #AllForAg will win free conference registration to the amazing annual meeting in Medora, North Dakota. So I encourage all of you all to get on it, starting now, okay? #AllForAg. For more information, see Amanda and Sarah Grace, our communications team. So now to expand on our enthusiasm for our theme, we turn to a conversation with the U.S. Farmers and Ranchers Alliance. Uniting All takes leadership. Aaron Fitzgerald, the Chief Executive Officer of the U.S. Farmers and Ranchers Alliance, is providing that kind of impactful and unique leadership, and it's the leadership we need. USFRA is bringing together consumer protection groups, NGOs, scientists, and agribusiness with the ultimate food change agents who we work with every day, U.S. farmers and ranchers. So she's creating this tent, and under her leadership, USFRA is stepping forward to envision a new decision-making platform for a sustainable 21st century food system. Prior to USFRA, Erin was the Senior Vice President of Global Sustainability for the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy, where she conducted an environmental impact assessment. And that led to an industry-wide voluntary carbon reduction goal of 25% by 2020 for the dairy industry. Erin has been recognized in Chicago's 40 Under 40, and she is an avid voice for sustainability and social responsibility. So please join me in welcoming Erin to kick us off. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Thank you. I'm excited. Thank you. Well, I am really excited to speak with you. Look, maybe I have two mics, maybe? Today. Can you hear me okay? Okay, cool. And really thanks Barbara Gunn for her leadership. I think it was 30 days into my tenure at U.S. Farmers and Ranchers said, wait till you meet all the change agents that are in this room. So I am really excited to meet you. It's wonderful to also see some friendly faces of people that I've worked with in my career and even now here in this room, because I'm counting on you in this whole hashtag. I want to see lots of hashtags on this, that there is a need now more than ever for what I would call unprecedented leadership, but most importantly, contagious collaboration on what I would call an imperative for the next decade of ag. So I'm going to give you a little bit of the reason of why, and then I hope we leave time for 10 minutes of conversation on what could it possibly mean for all of you as change agents in your state and in your communities and working in the nation that can hold a candle or a conversation or a call to action on this topic. So I keep this on my desk, and it's a reminder to me that when we are having a dinner table conversation with anyone, that we see our economics, our culture, our communities, and the very backbone of our economies, and that whole notion of our rural economies front and center. And in the United States, we actually are a unique culture of a people. Throughout our history and in our country, when we have been faced with big challenges, agriculture has been the one that has been asked to step up and to provide and to think about the challenging conversations related to providing for our economies, providing for our dinner tables. And we have done this. After the Civil War, the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression, and even World War II, time and time again, agriculture stepped up and led. So it should be no surprise that as a culture of a people, when there are some tough conversations going on about how can we provide for our food, our families, our community, and the planet for future generations, that as a culture of a people, the American consumer started with the conversation first of food and ag. We have this incredible legacy and respect and honoring of agriculture's roots. We even use, as a culture of a people, these words. We refer to our nation as the land of milk and honey, a breadbasket, amber ways of grain, and my favorite, blessed and bountiful. As a culture of a people, we even have a whole holiday dedicated to honoring the harvest. And I have been on a quest to really ask ourselves a fundamental question: what does it mean to honor the harvest in the 21st century? There is no doubt that the farmer generations before us have always considered the principle of agriculture to nourish people, provide for our communities and a growing nation, and provide for the planet. And I believe that we are at a similar precipice, a moment in time when our sector is being asked and called upon. So what is this thing called sustainability? And I will use the word climate change. So population times consumption. We have heard this. In agriculture, we've constantly said that we're going to need to be able to keep up with the pace of population. We're currently consuming 1.4 planet Earths. Does anybody know in this room what happened on July 29th? Nobody? Okay, this was a really big holiday that no one talks about. It's called Earth Overshoot Day. It was the day that we actually started borrowing resources from our children and grandchildren. We do have a finite resources, and that's the backbone of any commodity or any type of economic structure, is how you manage your natural resources. We've also heard this quite a bit in agriculture, that we're going to have to grow 70% more food to feed a nation. I would argue not necessarily more, but optimized. Make certain that everything that is harvested from our lands goes to its highest purpose to honor that harvest. Utilize it, provide for nourishment on American consumer plates. Don't waste it. 1 in 6 people are still food insecure. And by goodness, anything that is harvested from our land could also be used to offset and provide for green products, renewable products that can solve for the ecosystem services. So it's not necessarily just more. But even if you thought of the more question, that means that we would have to produce as much food as we produce in all of mankind up to this point in the last 8,000 years. Now, for any other sector, thinking about the next 30 years, you can imagine, sure, the energy sector is going to get that much more environmentally. They could meet that innovation challenge. You could imagine that logarithmic curve, right? Getting that much more efficient. If we're talking about the tech sector or the healthcare sector, you can imagine that level of scale of change. But for agriculture, this 30-year challenge, we work with Mother Nature. And that means that every growing season worldwide and in our farmers each spring, when a farmer goes out there, that they have to get that much incrementally better. It's a chance. And that innovation curve, that real reality of getting that much better each growing season is at the heart of this conversation. This is fundamentally an innovation and challenge scale unprecedented. And this is a complicated system. We have to fully appreciate the task at hand here. The diversity of growing and producing foods from this land, again, that land of milk and honey, and dare I say, if I look around the world, we will be the nation where a lot of these solutions come from. We have over 10,000 different soil types. We have 21 hydrologic zones of watersheds, which have 2,000 different watersheds attached to them. And we have 26 growing regional sheds that tells you, growing zones, that tells you what you can plant when and where. And guess what? Those are changing too. Who would have thought we would be growing corn in Canada? So it is complicated. It is not just the ability to do more, and it's not just the ability to innovate, it's also adapting and being resilient to this complexity of this biological system. Now, there has been this conversation in this moment of time that has really started. In 2015, how many people know about the Sustainable Development Goals? This room, I would assume much more so. Okay, in 2015, 193 world leaders said the greatest universal challenge of our time is our ability to nourish people and nourish them well in the face of climate change. Now, in agriculture, as a culture, we have been saying for a long time, please, just recognize all the stuff that we're doing. Well, guess what? You now have 193 presidents of nations saying agriculture is front and center in this conversation, and with that comes a lot more people putting a lot more emphasis and questioning of what is agriculture's contribution. How can you meet these grand challenges before us? But what gets me excited when I start seeing goals is I think, okay, how can we get to the goal? I get super excited in talking to my farmers. Because for a long time, when I started using the word sustainability, they'd say, well, what is sustainability? How can I be more sustainable? How can you ask me to do more? And then they would start using this very powerful word called stewardship. And stewardship are the values and the commitments, again, of a culture of a people who are saying, I am committed to leave this land better for the next generation. And sustainability, well, that's putting your values to work. That's day in and day out, no matter how hard it is, getting the economic business models to line up for your community and planet. Many of these CEOs and leaders are trying to figure out how to make those business models work. And they're actually having to go back into their companies and create purpose-driven business models and teach this notion of put your values to work against these goals. It's tough business, this notion of sustainability. But I actually think that the leaders in the food and ag sectors is the sector that is perfectly poised to own this conversation and step up and lead. Because as a consumer, I care truly, and we now know 87% of consumers care about land, air, and water. And I take incredible comfort in knowing that 48% of the land mass in the United States of America is in the hands of 3 million farmers who absolutely, day in and day out, care about this topic. And it's on these lands where 90% of all of our rain and snow fall. It's on these lands where 70% of our waters are managed. And it's on these lands where I see flyways and pollinators. And it's on these lands where I see actual hope of solving some of these problems. It is not Richard Branson or Elon Musk that is going to go solve the climate change, the carbon problem. The only known machine that I know that can suck carbon out of the air is some green stuff and some brown stuff and the stuff that these guys go steward. And let me repeat that. If you walk out of this room, brown stuff and green stuff are the cool stuff. And I'm going to show you a bunch of stats why. I truly believe that the complexity of growing and nourishing food for that next generation in the face of climate change at the scale and rate of what is happening does require unprecedented leadership and innovation to go meet this challenge. And it is not unlike traversing the ocean for the first time or going to the moon. We fundamentally need an earthshot, a level of clarity amongst leaders that agriculture truly is the solution. We have the ability to go do these things. That is what we do, and we've done it for generations, and we can meet the grand challenge before us. So I'm going to play a quick video. I'll sit here.
To be honest, I don't remember starting. I was 6 when I knew what I wanted to be. You're only 2 now, but sometimes I swear I can already see it in your eyes. It was your granddad who got me into it. Put me in charge of my own acreage at 16. Boy, I had so many ideas. Heck, I was pretty confident about what I was doing. The innovations truly becoming more and more sustainable. I felt like I was on a mission. And if I'm really honest, I still can't fully wrap my head around how it didn't work. But now we're here, at a point where continuing just doesn't make sense anymore. Your mother and I are selling the farm. Every single year. We talk to the pig and the roller, explore them with one. And we're just going to move the city because it'll be a brighter future. And I want you to understand why. It's not just the crop getting more severe. We were working to stay ahead of that, but the costs keep running up and prices keep going down. Then one day you wake up in a place where one bad season cannot be you and everyone you care about right over. And that's not a good place. I worry about how much we've invested out here. And at the same time, I can't help but think about what that investment brought us. It used to be nothing but desert here, and now there's so much potential on the soil. But it seems like nobody cares. And that's why we're legal. I don't want to plant a drain in you only for you to find out later that it's not a living. And if people don't understand, or worse, they don't care. They just blame everything on you. And you start losing your pride. And that's no life. The farm is everything to me. And I want you to know that. But my family needs even more. So everything that I do, in the end, has got to be for you.
Something big over climate change was agriculture had a seat at the table, and are we a part of the problem or part of the solution?
Oh my gosh, I think that we are the solution to climate change. We have not had the conversation that we actually can offset carbon from the fossil fuels.
improve our environment. I'm inspired every day by our peers. We monitor our soils with GPS, and we know to the point how to manage our soils to optimize impact and increase crop productivity and decrease carbon sequestration.
Superheroes.
Our time is now, but we only have about 30 harvest cycles left to get it right. That is more important now than ever. I see the future is bright.
Let's go home.
Yeah.
It's a really exciting time to be in farming because we'll be one of the first industries to have a negative carbon footprint.
Thanks. So at U.S. Farmers and Ranchers, we are all about having this leadership dialogue. And when U.S. Farmers and Ranchers was created in 2010, it was from a fundamental premise that, my gosh, can't we all in agriculture all work more together? About a year and a half ago, we took the due diligence to change that mission, saying it doesn't make sense if it's just farmers talking to ourselves. We need leaders, I see Jack, I'm calling on you, like the brands and the other at the table, really to start working on this problem, because if we really are in the food and ag sector, then maybe working together, we're 15% of the American workforce. Maybe that is the force at work to go solve this challenge. So we have 57 different farmer groups. I encourage anyone in this room that wants to get involved, and I'll talk a little bit how to do that. We said that this required active leadership at the table, and we formed an advisory group and kind of had this harebrained idea that shouldn't we get all the leaders in the room to ask a very simple conversation? How might agriculture truly be a solution to ecosystem services and climate change? And we said, you know what, it's not enough to have a conference where you have these amazing leaders passing each other on stage. Boots on the ground, start working on some solutions. So what has come out of this, I'm looking at Jack, because he can also answer some of these questions. He's on our advisory council. It's been a lot of hard work. You'll have in your, I think, the vision, which I'm going to show you about, and then 9 action network projects. So here is the makings of a draft vision. It is up still for editing and control and providing feedback. A resilient, restorative, and climate-smart agriculture system that produces abundant and nutritious food, natural fiber, and clean energy for a sustainable, vibrant, and prosperous America, getting back to that rural economic engine. And then here, I'm not going to go into this, but here's outcomes that we want to see, goals, sub-goals related to that. And this picture could look like a little bit of Pollyanna, but I will tell you that the leaders that have been on these calls talking about the lexicon that we can agree to, what does it mean, has been very, very powerful. For example, we had Chatham House Rules, I can't tell you who, but we had the name, but the founder of a large ethanol organization, the leader at a big apparel organization. I can say the brands, but not the names. So it's Poet, Patagonia, and the head of the regenerative ag movement. All groups that would seemingly coming into the forum did not necessarily see eye to eye, but now are working together on what does that mean. And all of a sudden there was an aha moment when they said, well, no, we want to enable a bioeconomy. Don't we want everything coming from the surface of the earth rather than the inner part of the earth? We can all agree on that. And so it's this framework that is now, and then shared principles of how we want to work together. This is the hard work, what I'm asking you leaders in the room to consider. We are really about getting feedback now. We're in the hard work. We have the first draft that these leaders have come up with. And we want to get our farmer groups, and we represent a lot of farmers, but all of the people that you touch and in different councils that you are a part of, to truly get feedback and also ask what would have to be true for that to really come alive in the next decade. What are your hopes? What are you looking for? What are your commitments that you would like to see as we imagine this? So there's a survey as well, and I'll be sending you all of that if you want to participate. And then the way to think about this is a movement. You will all have your own individual efforts underway, but how does it collectively ladder up to make a sector vision and commitment? How do we bring the awareness that agriculture truly is the place, the sector where rural economic vibrancy happens, where we do provide for our communities, where we do provide for dinner tables, and we are providing for planetary benefit. We are on the path, and this is a series of choice points along the way, with the idea that we need to step up as a sector. They're in the UN, and there's a lot of other third-party entities that are starting to say, who can ask, who can solve this question? I truly believe this sector, if we do step up with and through each other, that we can unleash unprecedented leadership. We can begin to elevate the conversation of agriculture's potential. And what does that do? It brings economics, help, support, and also helps change perceptions. It can help start a new narrative of agriculture. And why is a decade of agriculture more than ever important? We currently sequester 100 times more carbon than is currently emitted in the air. That's our savings banks, right? That's what agriculture is already doing. But those lands are increasingly at risk. According to American Farmland Trust, I know that they're working on updating these numbers because there has been improvement. We're losing land due to urban encroachment. That is our solutions, right? That's a very big thing. Our farmland's disappearing. And these farmlands are also increasingly facing risk. I had the privilege of touring Mississippi. If anyone's from here, seeing 500,000 acres of farmland underwater. And this is not business as usual. Farmers are getting 7.8 cents out of a dollar. And if you talk to any brands, I can't pay you more. The consumer price index wouldn't support a 1% change, right? We've got to figure out new business models to inject in this sector. We also are a sector that is $2.8 trillion. We're an economic generator. We have 15% of the American workforce combined in agriculture in the food sector. We as farmers do not need to go it alone anymore. Working with and through the brands at that table, working to solve this conversation. But what gets me so excited is that I know that agriculture has reduced their carbon footprint, improved water efficiencies, depending on which commodity you're talking about, between 40 and 60%. We also are the nation that is the most efficient carbon compared to any other ag sector, American farmers. That's our ingenuity at work. And in the next 10 years in that decade of ag, according to the National Academy of Science, we're already on a path to have our carbon footprint in the next decade with current innovations in the pipeline that farmers can do. Now, with accelerated innovation and collaboration and investment in ag, we could be net negative carbon. That means that we would be the only sector that's not only reducing its footprint, but also has a handprint in society that is actually able to solve and enable a net zero economy for the United States. That is a very powerful sector to be a part of. So we are launching this decade of ag, or on the pathway, let's say. Lots of enrollment between here and then, counting on you guys to get involved. It will have a vision and a commitment attached to this, and then action network projects. One of the action projects is making certain we have new financial business models, transformative investment for sustainable development in agriculture. There are $30 trillion of capital that is sitting on the sidelines looking to invest in the environment. Why isn't our sector the first place where those dollars are going? We should be. And it's our goal to make certain that agriculture is the preferred place for investment. That stimulates jobs, that stimulates innovation, and it frankly stimulates our farmers. Second, Earthshot 2030. If you believe that data is needed in the hands of farmers rapidly for all that crazy biological stuff I told you about, then they need better information, and we need to unleash the power of our scientists to go solve this now. The healthcare sector did this when they launched the Human Genome Project, if you remember. They said, let's go get the data, let's go get the doctor and the patient working together. Similar premise. And then finally, culture change and communication. Clearly, we have amazing stories to tell. We can do a lot better job through videos, storytelling, and create a knowledge center for learning about this topic. Like we're calling it a digital destination, and lifting up stories of action that could be there. So with that, I would just say I'd love for you guys to get involved. We have time for about 4 minutes. I kind of went over of questions, but I will be around later today. And I know, Jack, I'm putting you on the spot too. I'm trying to look at some other people that have been involved in this effort. Go ahead.
So outside of farmers, what are some ways that college students can get involved too?
College students would be amazing. And I'm so glad you're here. So Manners is probably going to be attending our forums. That's one thing. I love what you guys are doing. Tweeting would be really helpful. I'm sure you guys are more digital maven than I am. You could also do what we're seeing a lot of brands and people do is actually show a screening of 30 Harvest and then reporting back. Because again, it's all about creating a conversation about this topic. So if you do that, just reach out to us and we'd love to hear how it went. Others? It's got to be more than the students getting involved. Good.
So I see how the organization is doing its best to explain the science behind lowering the carbon footprint of agriculture. What is being done as far as on the economic side to explain what that looks like from a financial standpoint?
Yep, great question. So that's this transformative finance project. We're currently working to update which variables on farms actually drive both economic and environmental performance. That's a key, making sure that the metrics that are common, because that's an efficiency play clearly for our farmers, but that's not enough. And we do believe that the farmer's balance sheet has been increasingly at risk. And that is why this transformative investment project is all about looking at new ways to provide and monetize ecosystem services for farmers. I believe, and as many in this room have thought for a long time, that yes, you could do nutrient trading schemes or carbon trading schemes, and look at Karen Ross, who's been a leader in this. But there are also other financial mechanisms such as green bonding, rainbow bonding, and the like that other financial institutions are looking to invest in farmers. I've seen some creative brands also look at Maple Leaf Foods in Canada, for example, took out a loan on behalf of all of their farmers to get reduced basis points. There are new types of creative ways that we can get financing and or investment on our farms. And that's what that project is really gearing up to do, because I agree, the economics don't make it work right now. Karen?
So, I'll talk really loud. I believe you have full food supply system at the table, all working together to collectively come up with solutions and a plan. But is Earthshot about the quantification? Do you think there's a chance that we can stop each brand doing their own quantification for our brand, and this will be what you'll be held to, so that we can have a common quantification methodology so that we can all, regardless of what we're farming, know the methodology that goes into that?
Yep. So I was in the dairy sector for 10 years working on the metrics for the common protocol for dairy. I'm looking at Jackie over there. It was a lot of hard work. I also know that my colleagues in all the commodity groups are doing the same thing. In fact, there's 12 different commodity roundtable groups. But for that to work on a farm, and imagine my past chairman, he's a beef farmer, he's a pork farmer, he's a corn and soy farmer. Right now, these metrics do not talk to one another. They need to talk to one another. So we are working on a pilot between pork, corn, and soy right now to figure out the interoperability and which variables matter. That pilot is key to Earthshot because then we know what data should we invest science around and which metrics start to help the supply chain and the farmers better talk to one another. But yes, I think we published a report, it's on our website. We interviewed 46 different brands and farmer groups, and we found out this isn't working, people. We got to take it to the next level, these metrics. So, yep.
Tell me, I don't need a mic. What are the messaging strategies to the 98% of us that don't produce agriculture, that just consume it?
So, I love that question because I go into farm groups all the time, and I will hear them say, we're the 2%, and the other 98% just don't get us today. And that is actually, I think, a false narrative. Who is the other? When you add up, and again, thinking about people-based movement versus culture change, versus communication. If every single one of the employees of General Mills, Nestle, a farmer group, that's 15% of the American workforce actually understood this topic and is living it, meaning that you can walk into a cocktail party or a church picnic or a book club. When they ask you about what's agriculture's contribution, right now what I see is that our employees and our staff cannot answer those questions. So who best else to talk about this than ourselves and own this flat out and then build from there? Quite often our agriculture groups have spent a lot of money trying to go after the lifestyle of health and sustainability consumer, and it's very expensive to get that worried mother. But when I think about what our brands do and do best is that they talk to them well. And so for farmers working in partnership with the brands, we can be stronger to have a better conversation. But first we, within the value chain, the 15%, need to own these facts and figures and feel comfortable about it. But ultimately, then get to the consumer. That's how you change hearts and minds. That's how you create a movement. Sorry. I know we're over.
Oh, okay. With the mic. Okay. So as a veteran and as a Hispanic, touching on the cultural change, you mentioned that it's a movement, all right, under this big umbrella of ag. How are we not losing our voices as independent communities under one umbrella? Because I've been in charge of veteran serving programs to get into ag in Florida, in South Florida specific. So, veterans and military history has a huge history in agriculture, especially coming back from wars. Yep. So, how is this cultural change and communication really working from a grassroots perspective?
So I would love to be able to address that. We put the Veterans Coalition on our podcast to actually start elevating the conversation about that. And I think every group has a story or a commitment that they can put forth. We're just literally creating the framework that you can lift up those stories. And we're trying to create the, I would say, megaphone to kind of get all this stuff up and running. So happy to continue to talk about that, for sure.
Let's give Erin a big hand.
Thank you.
I told you, uniting all for ag takes leadership, so thank you, Erin. That was fantastic. She mentioned the innovation, the 3 planks of innovation: social, environmental, and economic. And I'm really excited that our next panel is going to drill down on that third one, which is so important. So what's next for the farm economy? Impacts of the farm economy downturn can be felt throughout the agricultural and food supply chain as well as in rural communities. Our next panel is going to provide us with an outlook on the farm economy and what it means for farmers, agribusinesses, and rural consumers. So John and Rob, come on up, and I'm going to do some remarks about both of you. Please have a wonderful seat in the chairs. Dr. John Newton is the Chief Economist for the American Farm Bureau Federation. John, welcome. Glad you're here.
Thanks.
So glad to have you. That is the largest organization of independent farmers in the United States. And in this role, Dr. Newton's responsible for the management of Farm Bureau's economics department, and he coordinates and conducts analyses used for the Farm Bureau policy development and advocacy. Prior to joining Farm Bureau, John worked for the USDA as an agricultural economist and was detailed to both the Senate Agriculture Committee and the USDA Office of the Chief Economist. Following his service to USDA and the Congressional Committee, Dr. Newton was an award-winning faculty member at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. Where's my Illinois folks? So, Rob, welcome. So glad to have you. Dr. Robert Johansson has been the Department of Agriculture's, that is USDA, Chief Economist since 2015. As Chief Economist, Rob is responsible for the department's agricultural forecasts and projections and for advising the Secretary of Agriculture on economic implications of alternative programs, regulations, and legislative proposals. Please join me in welcoming John and Rob, and they're going to have a great discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and thanks, Rob, for joining us this afternoon. Before I get started, and thank you, Dr. Glenn, for having us both here. Where's WASDA? Can I see WASDA by a show of hands? WASDA, I only see 2, 3, 4, 5. You guys win conferences for 2019. I had a fantastic time out there and look forward to joining you all again. So thanks a lot, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I think I'll start out with some questions for Rob. We're going to have a dialogue. And something that we've been hearing around the country from many of our farmers, and I'm sure you all have been hearing this as well, is net farm income trended upward in 2019. Is this a sign, Rob, of optimism for the farm economy, or should we expect the ground conditions for farmers and ranchers to remain tough?
Well, that's a great question, John. And first of all, let me start by, again, thanking NASDA for inviting us here today. And I guess WASDA must have a very good conference.
You should go.
Given the fact that we had John at our conference last week, and I thought he would have given us a little bit of a nod to that. Of course, we had the Ag Outlook Forum last week, and we talked about a lot of these numbers. And I'll just recap a little bit on what we said last week. And, of course, our forecast for the new crop year is out. And as John mentioned, there is some signs, I guess some positive signs out there, as well as some, cautionary tales that all of you in the room probably know better than us. In different parts of the country, farmers are feeling stress more so than others. But let's just think about where we were last year. That's what I sort of couch a lot of discussion of 2020 on. Last year, we had a lot of uncertainty around what? Trade, for example, right? And of course, going into planting, we had a terrible year of planting. So 2 things I would say that point to a more positive outlook for 2020 for a lot of producers out there is, A, we've got a lot less uncertainty about trade. That's not to say we don't have any uncertainty of trade. I'm sure that we're going to talk about phase 1 in China here in one of these questions coming up. But compared to last year, USMCA, Japan, US trade deal, and phase 1 all are positive signals for producers going into 2020. We certainly are not expecting to have any kind of year like we had last year. So that's a positive. Of course, last year was terrible for planting progress, for the crop conditions all through the year, even into harvest. We've still got a lot of crop out there. 8% of corn and 2% of soybeans are still in the field. Still waiting to see what that looks like when spring harvest comes around. Looking at prices, we've seen some continued softening on prices. I think there was a lot of expectation about the markets bouncing back a little bit when the phase 1 deal was announced. But we got 360 corn and 880 soybeans expected going into the 2020 year. That'll be pushed around by weather and whatever happens down in South America, of course. But by and large, I would say signals are pointing towards positive signs for a lot of producers. Interest rates remain relatively low. That's keeping borrowing costs down. There's a lot of debt out there, but that debt is easier to finance than it has been in previous years. That's a good sign. But there are some tough situations out there. Break-even prices, certainly for corn and beans, just looking at those 2 commodities. 360 and 880 is not going to get there. I was talking with my friend Michael about this, and he can confirm that, although I point out that total cost, including land values, is certainly making break-even tough for producers. If you own your own land, you've got equity, it's a little bit easier. So let me just stop there and see if you have any follow-ups.
Well, I think you hit on a key point there, Rob, and that is farm income and commodity prices were somewhat boosted in 2019 because you had top up on prevent plant, you had disaster payments through WIP Plus, crop insurance net indemnities at $6.4 billion, MFP payments at $14.5 billion that followed $8.5 to $10 billion in payments in 2018. So farm income was supported in large part due to these efforts. What implications might that have for producers thinking about 2020 and their risk there?
You know, another great question, we'd probably get into this a little bit in question and answer if we have time, but certainly MFP and FPDP, Food Purchase and Distribution Program, and Market Facilitation Program were big components of the story in 2019, helped producers in a lot of situations turn that red balance sheet into a black balance sheet. So looking at 2020, we just moved out about $3.7 billion in tranche 3 payments. At the beginning of the year, that should help a good number of producers, but our hope and our expectation is not for that program to no longer continue into 2020, and I think you've seen some tweets about that. Hopefully, the trade deal is going to come in and start showing positive signs for purchases, and that will obviously help with prices. One thing I'll mention there is, of course, coronavirus is affecting China right now, and a lot of the components of the Phase 1 deal were contingent on us meeting with the Chinese and hashing out some issues. They've been playing around with non-tariff measures for quite some time that I think we had some good agreement on. It's just that we need to meet up to finalize on those agreements, whether that's chicken or other fruit and veg issues and trade. So I think those are positive signs. We just need to get together. Of course, USDA and USTR just announced a bunch of positive progress on that earlier today. So I think we'll start seeing some of that realization of the positive benefits from the Phase 1 deal starting to trickle in and help with the balance sheet. So again, hopefully we don't have MFP this year. And again, hopefully planning on better weather, we're not going to have as much prevent plant or as much crop insurance indemnities. With that, you've asked me some very complex questions. I'm sure we've got follow-up coming up later, but I've got one for you, John. And if there's a sector that you know better than most people in this room, and it's obviously a simple question, simple answer.
I'm scared.
The big news last week has been with regards to Dean Foods and their assets and DFA purchases of those assets. And dairy's been a major story in the news last year and continuing going forward, not just with processing, but also with dairy operations, feeling a lot of stress. So can you unwind that a little bit for us for 2020, John, and tell us what's going to happen with respect to processing?
First of all, Rob, I'm not on social media, so what tweet are you talking about? Did something happen?
I'm not either. I've just been told by people that are younger people than I am.
I am on social media. I'm actually a pretty avid user of social media, so I know what you're talking about. There's a saying in the dairy industry that there's 5 people in the world that know how milk is priced in the United States, and 4 of them are dead. I happen to be one of those folks, Rob. So, I think the challenges in the dairy industry, when you think about where milk prices have been for 4 or 5 years now, we were really, I think going back to 2014, 2015, the European Union had a quota system that was coming offline in 2015. And those European dairy producers, they knew that quota system was coming offline in 2015, and they were laying stainless steel in 2014. So they were ready to go. And what do dairy farmers do when milk prices are high? Milk more cows. What do they do, Secretary Ross, when milk prices are low? Milk more cows. So we've had an oversupply market in the U.S. dairy industry for some time. We're finally, in 2019, moved from a market that was long milk to one with short milk, and that's why we saw milk prices jump to $20 per hundredweight. But dairy is going through some structural changes. You see fluid milk consumption per capita is declining. We need to find a way to get milk in the hands of that on-the-go consumer. but dairy consumption by and large continues to grow. Myself included, we're eating a lot of cheese, a lot of ice cream, a lot of yogurt. We just consume less in the bottle. So I think that industry is evolving. Farm Bureau members have had a dairy task force for a year. We look forward to continuing that dialogue on how milk is priced, on how we coordinate the supply and demand of milk in the United States. But it is, without question, dairy is going to look a lot different in 20 years than what it does today. And when we saw last year, we lost the largest number of dairy farms in the United States last year, as far back as the data goes, and that points to the challenges of the dairy industry. No, but I didn't know Rob was going to be asking me questions, Barb. I thought it was just the other way around here. I think, some good news, Rob, we're all excited to see with the signing of the Phase 1 deal. What impacts do you think this will have across the farm economy sectors, from specialty crops, farm machinery? The secretary the other day said every farmer is from the Show Me State. Every single farmer is from Missouri. When do we think we're going to start to feel those benefits?
Well, I guess, for lack of a better term, that's the $40 billion question. We know that China's committed to purchasing a huge amount of product above what they had previously purchased from us. Certainly as an economist, I look at the feasibility of that. Is it feasible? And of course it's feasible. China's food demand is significant. Our ability to supply that market is substantial. But it's going to take a little bit of time. I think of it sometimes as, steering a large freighter across the ocean. It takes a while to change trading patterns, and we saw that a couple years ago when the tariffs first started affecting U.S. producers. It took a little bit of time to find new marketing channels, and again, now that producers have found those, for most part, being asked to go back to selling in a big way to China, I think is going to take a little bit of time there. We're certainly going to see that demand arrive, and we'll start selling to China. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, the coronavirus is slowing that down. Our estimates showed, we were using the IMF estimates, which showed roughly 6% growth in China this year, which is on line with what they've had the last couple of years. The coronavirus has knocked that down. Private estimates have put that down around 4%, 4.5% in the first quarter. Looking at SARS and previous outbreaks, we expected, within a quarter to have China rebound back to their normal growth rate. And I think that will, hopefully that's what we'll see, although, there's questions about whether it's, we've seen the sort of the peak in China and they're sort of turning the corner, but there's some other worrisome signals in other parts of the globe, whether that's North or South Korea or Europe in the case of Italy. So we'll, continue to monitor that, but I think that has slowed things down. We're expecting certainly a big fourth quarter this year in sales to China, and we should start seeing positive signals showing up here as soon as we can get together and start getting those ships moving across the ocean. We've got plenty of product to sell, and certainly we've seen pork starting to move in a big way to China. ASF is another question mark, a little bit of uncertainty there on how quickly they're going to be able to rebuild their herd and bring up their soybean demand. But again, we would expect some fits and starts along the way, but certainly going over the next 2 years, we're expecting to see $80 billion worth of product going over there.
Well, I think, for many of the Farm Bureau members, and probably all the farmers across the country, really anxious to see those products move. The challenge, I think, Rob, for farmers right now is they're sitting down at their kitchen tables trying to think about, what am I going to plant this year? We know what the ag outlook for them. You had a big jump in soybean acres, a big jump in corn acres because Prevent Plant came back online. But if you're sitting at that kitchen table right now and a farmer's thinking about soybeans in their rotation for 2020, and what I'm hearing from you is we're thinking fourth quarter when we're going to see sales to China really accelerate. What do you say to that farm family?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. I know that we forecast, 85 million acres this year coming back online with respect to plantings. That's going to be a pretty big crop, a huge corn crop, over 15 billion bushels if we sort of hit average weather and producers plant that amount. Of course, right now the signal is looking for producers to plant more corn than beans, and that's why we're seeing that. So there is still a little bit of hesitancy in the market. with respect to that sort of soybean corn price ratio. And that basis changes depending on whether we're talking about the Southeast or up in the upper Midwest, where you might see more of a signal to plant soybeans. So again, I think it comes down to a lot of producers are, inking out how much they're going to want to spend, and we've been in a tight cycle now for 4 or 5 years, and producers have been tightening their belts and looking for ways to save money. I think they're certainly planning for as well as they can for a better year than last year. One thing that may help with that certainly is innovation, and we heard just a little bit about sort of the innovation agenda from the previous speaker on the Farmers and Ranchers Coalition. And you also moderated some sessions last week on this particular issue, and I know that Farm Bureau has been doing some work in that area as well. How do you see innovation, and can producers in this sort of low price environment still make it work in terms of, obviously we're going to be seeing increasing yield, but being more efficient with respect to inputs, and some other observations maybe that you can share from what you heard last week?
Well, I think you're right. Aaron at USFRA, they do a great job communicating what farmers and ranchers are already doing. The panel that we had last week at Ag Outlook Forum, we all talked about sustainability, the technology advancements that we're having in precision agriculture, how farmers are more productive, doing more with less. The Secretary mentioned that in his opening remarks on their goal to increase ag productivity by 40% while cutting the environmental footprint of ag by 50%. So we reviewed that in this panel, and quite frankly, when you look at the data, and we've crunched the numbers on a per unit basis, agriculture is getting better every single year. Our contribution to greenhouse gas is less than 10%. You look at on a per unit level, dairy farmers, 25% more efficient than where they were 30 years ago. Beef is 10% more efficient than where they were 30 years ago on a greenhouse gas level. So I think the challenge is we're sometimes a little bit too good at raising those crops or producing the livestock, and that's where I think trade is certainly a key component in making sure that we have markets for all the products that we do produce, because we're darn good at doing that. Thinking a little bit beyond the farm gate, Rob, U.S. consumers spend less than 5% of their disposable income on food here in the United States, but globally, food prices have started to come up a little bit, primarily due to African swine fever. From your perspective, do you think we might start to see price increases here in the United States for consumers on food?
Well, certainly ASF is pushing up meat demand globally, and I think we're expecting to see higher prices for pork going into 2020. But we also expect higher prices both for dairy, you mentioned that earlier, as well as beef this year. So I think those are good signs for producers. They're going to be able to capture some of that margin. I think poultry prices we expect to remain flat, maybe slightly down. How does that translate to the retail level? I think that will depend on a lot of things. Of course, we did look at food purchases in the United States, and Americans are spending about 5% of their income for food at home, about another 5% for restaurant purchases. But by and large, we know American consumers have a good value out there. They've, relative to the rest of the world, they're spending less of their disposable income on food than anyone else. But yet we know that the quality of that food is increasing every year, the safety of that food is increasing every year, and certainly producers are getting more efficient translating into production levels that you mentioned. We still expect real food prices over the next 10 years to be flat to declining. So I just mentioned some positive signals for 2020, but when you account for inflation and those kind of things over the next 10 years, still flat to declining, so producers are going to have to become more innovative, figure out ways to sketch out the balance sheet and find a way to make it work. Let's see. Let me throw one out to you, because we've given a lot of thought to this at USDA, and in particular in 2019, there was a lot of questions about this. A lot of producers were pretty unhappy with the estimates that we put out, particularly in August, and that's a question that I'm sensitive to, since our office participates in that process, and we find that putting out free and public information on our expectations of production and prices is a major component of what USDA does, providing that information out there. Yet a lot of producers are leery of our information we put out. So what have you heard in your travels going around and regarding at least what I see as a success story in at least USDA agriculture, in the sense that our estimates are getting more and more precise each year? I don't think producers see it that way.
So are you trying to tell me farmers didn't like the corn acreage and yield numbers this year?
I think that's fair to say. I don't know.
Is that translation there? Yeah. You know, I say this all the time when I get a chance to sit down with USDA, whether it's with Hubert, with yourself, with you know, Mary Bowman, who used to be over at ERS. I can't do my job without the work that you all do. And I think it's important to highlight the good work of USDA. I think it's important to communicate how important those surveys are, how important there are for farm program benefits, whether it's ARC and PLC or dairy margin coverage. But quite frankly, we do need to sit down and have farmers at the table and restore that confidence. I don't like to say it, but you know, in my travels across the country, I think it's definitely been shaken a little bit, and I think that once farmers sit down, we had Hubert and Lance come visit with our Farm Bureau Issue Advisory Committee members last week, and 10, 15 farmers sitting around the table with Hubert and Lance. And when Hubert and Lance left, and Joe Parsons was there too, when they left, those farmers that were in the room were like, they're really good at their job. So we just need to find a way to have more farmers engaged with USDA so they can go back in their communities and say, you know what, this is the best doggone data that we got, and let's go out there and make some decisions with it. But I think it's going to take some shoe leather to do that, and I think we're ready to sit down and help you guys do that.
And I guess following on that one thing we do hear a lot at USDA, and the folks that John was just mentioning are in NAS, who do a lot of the survey work, for those of you that don't know them. But you know, when we point out to producers that we do use that information to tailor programs to meet their needs. So I can tell you for a fact that we used that survey data for putting together such programs as the Cotton Ginning Cost Share Program, the Market Facilitation Program in 2018 and 2019. And without that information, without producers' responses on those surveys, we would be a lot less able to target those programs to where the need is. So with that, I don't know if we can have time to throw it open to some Q&A here. Like, we got another 10 minutes, and I'll let John get back to moderating the question and answers.
I think questions from the audience would be fantastic.
Well, then we can turn to the NCAA. We had some. We had.
Structural damage to supply from the United States over the 2-year trade war, such as reading Argentina supplying its increase to China, pork and things like that. What sort of permanent structural damage do we need to overcome?
That sounds like a question for Rob.
Well, yeah, well, certainly we knew that you can see over the last 20 years, 30 years, the amount of land planted in South America to soybeans has been increasing. And of course, the Brazilians in particular have switched over to their second crop corn, so a short season soybean crop and a short season corn crop, and that has expanded the amount of acres that Brazil can plant to their second crop corn, becoming a major competitor on corn as well as soybeans. So to your point, we saw that with the 2018-2019 tariffs in place that both Argentina and Brazil increased their plantings to capture that market, and those acres aren't going away. Just as we saw in 2007, 8, and 9, when the RFS program was pushing up the demand for corn, that we saw a lot of acres come online at that point in time, not just in South America but also in some other parts of the Black Sea area, as we cannibalized some of our wheat acres out in the Plain States. So again, those acres aren't going away, so they are going to be a major factor for us to contend with. In terms of other infrastructure, whether that's transportation, I think we're in a good shape there. I don't think other than obviously we need some improvements to the lock and dam system, but that's a side issue. That's not specific to the tariff situation. I don't know, John, do you have?
I agree 100%. I think it goes back to the 1996 Farm Bill, the Freedom to Farm Act that decoupled farm program payments from planting decisions. It ties in the renewable fuel standard. So while we were busy planting corn, they were busy planting soybeans and growing that market. So make no mistake, some of our policy decisions have invited competition around the world, including the last 2 years. And I don't think that's going to go away. We're some of the best in the world at doing what we do. We just need to get in those markets and be able to compete. We need to compete on a level playing field. We need to take down non-tariff barriers to trade, and we need to get other countries around the world to accept sound science practices. I think that's going to be critical for the success of U.S. Ag.
Is there one more tough question for these guys? All right, well, I guess y'all
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks
Yeah, thank you so much.
Rob, thank you. Really a pleasure. What an honor to have those two who partner together every day on the farm economy issues. And NASDA is part of that conversation, too. So our next presentation for this kickoff session is we save the best for last. And this is entitled Integrating Satellite and Field Data for Improved Decision-Making Across the Ag Sector. NASA Harvest, not NASDA, NASA Harvest is a new multidisciplinary program commissioned by NASA and led by the University of Maryland to enhance the use of satellite data in decision-making related to ag and food security in the U.S. and globally. NASA Harvest this year was the first winner of our first-time speaker competition. We had almost 40 applications to bring the latest information to you all, so I'm glad you're sticking to your seats here. This is going to be a good one. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Estefania Piracelli, who is the lead economist at the NASA Harvest Hub at the University of Maryland. She serves as the co-chair of the NASA Harvest Working Area on Markets and Trade, which includes research on the use of remote sensing for commodity price forecasting and market volatility. In her role at University of Maryland, she also supports the G20 group of Earth Observations Global Agricultural Monitoring Program. That is the acronym GEOGLAM, which aims to increase market transparency and food security by strengthening the international community's capacity to use coordinated, comprehensive, and sustained Earth observations. Ms. Piracelli is also a consultant for the Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO of the United Nations, as part of the Agricultural Market Information System, another G20 initiative. So with that, let's welcome Estefania to the stage and hear what they're doing at NASA. Thank you. I'm real happy to meet you.
Thanks. Hi. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you for having me here. Today I'm going to show you how satellite data can improve decision-making in agriculture. But before I start, what do a satellite and a farmer have in common? Well, they are both looking at the same plot, but from a different perspective. So some satellites are looking at that same field, perhaps even twice a day, or every 5 days, or every 16 days. And the good thing about them is that they can see things that we cannot. They can detect different variables that we are not able to see. So satellite data used for agriculture date back to early 1970. And many NASA instruments have agricultural utilizations, such as vegetation, soil, and water. But there's still a lot of potential for this technology. And lately, we've been hearing a lot about remote sensing and satellites and all that. And why is that? Well, there are several factors that came together. Not only cloud computer and machine learning capacities got better, but also some programs made their satellite image free to the public. So here, for example, we have different images from MODIS, Landsat, and Planet. And in 2008, the data from Landsat became available and free to everyone, and also they made the archive free too. So imagine that that same image, that same sense, was $6,000 back in 1983. So the potential that was unleashed is huge. And also lately, for 2017, there have been several estimations, and there's one that says that the economic benefits of making this information free and public account for $3.4 billion globally, just for 2017. And $2 billion was just accounted for the US users. So with remote sensing technologies, different landscapes around the world can be reached, even if there's no road to get there. And the good thing about having a very long series of information is that we can make analysis of different trends and different policy measures and different ecological impacts. So something that is very useful for using remote sensing technology is that the crop estimations around the world got much better, and it's a good tool to help enhance the market transparency and also the different markets. So this information is not only important for farmers and consumers, but also for traders, policymakers at a global and national level too. So with all this, in 2017, NASA Harvest was launched. This is a new innovative program on food security and agriculture, and was created by NASA, funded by NASA, and this is run by the University of Maryland. This program pushes the boundaries of the technological frontier, and the idea is to create a space for different communities to get together and discuss the newest developments of different research and what the different communities need, such as academia, international organizations, private companies. And the idea is to keep pushing the technological frontier. So as I mentioned before, our consortium brings together different people, different companies, different organizations, space agencies, international organizations, and private sector too, from different countries and at the global, at the regional level. So we co-develop our projects with end users, and it's very focused on the needs of the different end users. So we work in different projects, again, from the farm level to the global level. I'm going to start with the global level. And here's the interaction that we do with GeoGlam and with AMIS. So, as I'm sure that most of you know, between 2008 and 2012, there was a big price spike and a lot of price volatility in international markets. So that's why the G20 created a platform, and they did this action plan on fruit price volatility and agriculture. They launched two different initiatives. One is called AMIS, is the Agricultural Market Information System, and the other one is called GeoGlam, and both of them are working together to make market more transparent. So AMIS aims to monitor price volatility and generate the markets to make them be more transparent. And then GeoGlam monitors the crop conditions around the world for different G20 countries. So NASA Harvest is a contribution to the G20 GeoGlam program. So one of the interesting things that we are doing together between AMIS and GeoGlam is that AMIS asks GeoGlam to create a new and different operational crop assessment. And the AMIS Market Monitor is a report that is published monthly and is free to everyone, so I invite you to subscribe. And we wanted to make a report that was easy to digest, especially for policymakers that they don't have much time to be reading like very long reports. So this is a 10-15 pages report, and the idea is that in a glance you can see the situation from all the different G20 countries. And well, GeoGlam came together with the crop monitor for AMIS, and as you can see, it's very easy to see, and it's not very technical, and the assessment is very interesting because a lot of the different analysts from all over the world get together in a conference call and discuss the situation in the different countries. And also our technicians created a platform that the analysts can access to different remote sensing databases. So other thing that AMIS has to GeoLam is for some help understanding the corn production in this case, for China. China in 2017 had a census and they revised their historical data back many years. So AMIS wanted to understand where this corn came from and all that using remote sensing technology. So our team at GeoLam, they replicated a methodology that they are doing in South America. They are currently analyzing the soybean area in Argentina, Brazil, and the rest of the countries. And they use remote sensing and machine learning to guide the specialists to go and do some crop cuts and to go to a specific places. So the satellites are kind of like guiding the analysts. And well, this project is ongoing, and we hope to get really good results soon. Then after the really good effect that we had with the crop monitor for AMIS, we saw, and some people from the early warning community reached us to see if we could replicate the same idea of the crop market monitor to generate something for the early warning community. So there was a big need to have something, a crop assessment that was common ground for everyone. And especially when there's many agencies that they have some overlap, geographically speaking. So they were all looking at the same places, but with different assessment of the situation. And well, the idea of this report is to get them together. We have a monthly call that at least it lasts for 2 hours. And we try to see place by place what all these different agencies think about the crop situations. And we have different agencies such as FAO, FuseNet, and WFP. Especially in East Africa, there were a lot of discrepancies. And the good thing about this report is there's like a common ground now for all these assessments. And what we are trying to do is to better allocate the resources for food aid and humanitarian purposes. So they can target better where these needs are. So a nice example of the application of the technology is that also different governments reached out to us to see if we could replicate the same, but at a national level. So this is a case of Uganda. In 2017, they were able to do policies more specific to the needs of the people according to the crop conditions, and they were able to save 50% of the fund that they had to allocate for food aid. So between the early warning community, the crop monitor report for AMIS, and then the different national, reports, we are almost covering the whole world, and we are trying to work to fill the different gaps that are still missing. And then at a more national level, we are also working with different organizations. Right now, we are working on the workshop of emerging technologies and method in Earth observation. We are co-hosting this biannual meeting together with NASA Harvest, USDA, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and GeoGlam. And the idea, again, is to get together, see what everybody's doing. There's a lot of researchers from all around the world and from academia and the private sector. They come together and we discuss what are their latest results on research and try to collaborate with each other. So what are more examples of activities? We monitor and forecast agricultural yields and conditions globally. And we are going more now to the field scale. And in one of our projects, we are creating dashboards with Earth observation data sets that help us to understand the different situations all around the world for all the different countries. And the idea of this is to also help us replicate the yield expectations for different countries. So this is a really exciting project. And we're also working at the national level with the Buenos Aires Grain Exchange to try to replicate the same within the different regions that they produce. And also we are exploring the possibility to try to analyze the conservation practices too. Well, and one of the constraints that we have in the remote sensing community is that in order to train our models, we need ground truth data. So we need samples from the ground and in the fields. And this is something that is very expensive to get, to go out there and drive and send an analyst and took the samples for all the countries that we're working on. So we believe in NASA Harvest that the public-private partnerships are very important. So we are collaborating with different companies that they have different needs that they can fulfill with remote sensing technology. So we try to have a win-win situation for all of us. So one of the latest launch was we are doing a collaborative study with Swiss Re, AgroRisk Ukraine, and also Green Triangle. And we're helping the this insurance company to try to minimize the amount of field trips that they have to do crop cuts to estimate their yields. And here we can see one of our collaborators that is showing us how complicated it is sometimes to get to different fields, especially in big countries like Ukraine, and something similar happens to countries like Argentina or Brazil. So we also have different ongoing projects with different crop types, and we're trying to estimate using machine learning technology during the season what is the planted area for different crops. And this research was inspired by the recent floodings in the Midwest here in the US. So we are working now with smaller portions of Illinois, and we're getting really exciting results. I'm showing you all these ongoing projects. We are also trying to look for the sustainability aspect of crop production, and this project is called Assessing Conservation Tillage Impacts on Yields. And what we're trying to do here, together with the Stanford University, is to try to look for a relationship between conservation practices and yields. And we found out that the relationship is positive, and we're very excited with that. So this is also an ongoing project. And then here, the last activity that I'm going to show you is how we're working together with farmers from the Illinois Corn Grower Associations and researchers from the Illinois University on improving nutrient management. So we are working very closely with them, and the Illinois Corn Grower Associations, they are selecting different farmers, and the farmers are providing data to our colleagues at the Illinois University. And with that, they help each other to see when the crop and when the plants need more nutrients or not. So while there are many other projects that I would like to share with you, but we will be here all afternoon, I invite you all to look in our website and follow us on Twitter to see the latest things that we're working on. But as a summary, I would like to say that satellite data is playing an increasingly central role across the agricultural community, and is enhancing opportunities for improved information. So the continuing collaboration between policymakers, agricultural communities, academia, and space agency is key to ensure we fully take advantage of the technology. Thank you so much.
Surely someone has a great question.
Let's see. Perhaps they want to go to a coffee break now.
I guess okay, please, yeah, Eric, we need a mic over there. Speak up.
So looking forward, what's your biggest concern for this technology? What's one of the worries we should be on the lookout for?
The worries in one sense.
So what is our worry long term? Will the technology change? Can we keep pace? What should we be concerned about to maximize the most value from this?
Well, I would say that as any new technology that is making a revolution, and it's providing good results in general. I will try to embrace it. So I think that is not something that we need to hide, but like try to work to see how this technology can help me in particular and different organizations in general.
Yep. What does a 3-meter resolution mean? Does that mean you can see that close?
Yes.
Is it the same technology the military is using?
It's so the 3-meter resolution is a Planet satellite. It's a private sector satellite, and you have to pay a fee to get that good resolution. But yeah, they're able to see that.
Another question? Yes, back, please.
Are you closing the circle on the data with analyzing the crops from a chemical analysis standpoint? That's what our background is, and I'm wondering if
From the
there's a reason to
chemical point
chat.
of view, what do you mean? For nutrient management or?
So actually analyzing the crops that you're doing research on and seeing what the climate impact is, but actually taking the crops and doing chemical analysis and validation on the crops.
Yeah,
value.
so we have one of our colleagues at the university is doing research on that. If you want, I can show you, or I can connect with him. Yeah. Thanks.
If I drop my cell phone in my field behind my house, can you help me find it?
We can try.
Another question? I'm going to ask one then. You saw the Harvard project with Illinois, corn growers,
Yeah.
and the University of Illinois. Are you replicating that in other states with like a grower organization and
Not-
land grant?
Yeah, not yet, but we would love to do that. I mean, we're now working on just specifically for Illinois, but the idea is to make, if everything, the results are good and everything, we're hoping to replicate that to other states.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
We have about 49 others that want
Yeah.
to do this. Okay. Any other questions? All right, then we're going to.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. I really appreciate it. Yeah. I told you we saved the best for last. This concludes our kickoff session for the conference. We are going to be in a break now until 4:15, at which time committees begin. Committee meetings are open to all of you, including the press. And if you would like to review the committee membership, that's in your policy book. So, 4:15, Animal Ag is in salons 5 to 7, and Rural Development and Financial Security Committee is in salons